Okay, so this is the 12th installment, and actually the further I get into these, the more I realize that these are loaded words, and we are just brushing the surface. And so if you want to devote your life work to one of these themes, you could definitely do that. But today we're going to do another theme, namely cherubim, and I don't know what idea you have of them now, but let's look at what the Bible has to say. And so we open at the end of our third chapter of Genesis. Genesis 3:24, he drove out the man at the east of the Garden of Eden. He placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. And so, not flying babies. Actually, the word cherubim is pretty uncommonly used. It comes from the word karibu, which was a Mesopotamian figure of the time. They were guardians. And actually, you do know about these Mesopotamian figures, namely the Sphinx. And so you have the Sphinx, and if you look at a layout of the map of the Sphinx and what's around it, you'll actually find that the pyramids are right by it. And in fact, you have the pyramids which were dedicated to different pharaohs, like Khufu, etc. And those are their tombs. And the pharaohs were seen as gods. But then also you have a temple in front of these pyramids. And so the Sphinx is located directly in front, facing to the east of these temples. And in a sense, this giant creature structure is guarding these temples and saying, look out, this is a reverent place to be. And so that's the same idea we get from the Bible, as we'll see, that these cherubim, as we see in Genesis, are supposed to be guarding God's holy place, protecting the tree of life, which is God's presence. And so in Ezekiel 1:5-10, I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north. This is God's throne coming to Ezekiel. An immense cloud with flashing light and surrounding by a brilliant light. In the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Their faces looked like this. Each of the 4 had the face of a human being, and on the right side each had the face of a lion, and on the left the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. And so here we see it, and you'll see it later. They're throne guardians. So just like the Sphinx guarded the temples there, these creatures, like majestic creatures, were meant to say this is a place to get serious in God's presence. So they're protectors from anyone who shouldn't be there. But probably more importantly, what we're curious about is what are they like. And so actually, if you read in Revelations 4:6-8, we find around the throne, again, were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front of and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second like an ox, the third like a man, the fourth like a flying eagle. And so now what you see here is they're separate. They're not the 4 faces. Each one has their own. And so what I think is important before we go into much detail is that these are spiritual beings. And so part of the spirit world, which means they do not actually have physical bodies. And then because otherwise there'd be a contradiction right there. The cherubim in Ezekiel do not match the cherubim in Revelation. As one has 4 faces, one is 4 separate creatures. But the idea is that it's symbolic, and so it's okay. The animals, the creatures, are meant to represent something. So then, these hybrid creatures were not a new thing. They're actually like a favorite thing in ancient times, and of course we have them in modern times. Narnia and Harry Potter, you'll see the Sphinx again, but also back then you'd have the Lamusu. So I couldn't pull it up here, but I have a picture here. This is a Assyrian Lamusu, which is Assyrian cherubim. This is the same idea. So you have 4 separate parts is the main idea. It's called a tetramorph, and so you have the wings, the head, the body, and the feet. And so what a tetramorph is, tetra 4, it's a symbolic arrangement of 4 differing elements. And you've probably, just in the biblical sense, you already heard the 4 listed. You have the fearful majesty of a lion, and the strength and the endurance of an ox, and the transcendent ability of an eagle and its swiftness, and then also the intelligence a man would have. And so all these things together, like, this is creation guarding God's throne. And so Well, just as an aside, like I said, we can't go into details on all things. The four fixed, the stable positions and signs of the zodiac actually are the ox, the lion, Taurus and Leo, and then the eagle, and an angel, the man or angel, the Scorpio and Aquarius. And more commonly, you've probably heard of the four symbols associated with the elements of fire, water, air, and earth. And so the idea is you have all of creation and these the most powerful elements of creation represented in these cherubim, and they're guarding God. And so, yeah, just intelligence and majesty and strength and transcendence. I think that is the presence of God, and that's the reverence we're supposed to have. So neatly, when we get to the New Testament, we have the Gospels, and you actually have in Christian art. Just go look up the tetramorph. Christian tetramorph, and that's what we have with the Gospels. And so, why do we have four Gospels? So it is for historical accuracy, but it's more so it's about the art of it. And so, maybe you've heard that the four evangelists represent the four living creatures of the book of Ezekiel, and there's parallels, and people argue on which one they represent. But Matthew being the man, Mark the lion, Luke the ox, and John the eagle for their different takes on the Scripture. But the idea is the depiction of Jesus and the association between him and the cherubim, and him showing us the presence of God and telling us what it means to actually be in God's presence. And so, yeah, this was vague because I think if you want to know more, you really have to dive into yourself. But I want to kind of bring it around, because the story is that we were kicked out of the garden, guarded by this animal-like, very fearful animal-like creature guarding us, along with a sword. And so interestingly, when we get to Psalm 22, which Jesus quotes, I think it's Psalm 22, hopefully not Psalm 23, but Psalm 22, when Jesus quotes it on the cross, my Lord, why have you forsaken me, right? It's also, if you read on, I would encourage you to read this chapter and see the parallels. But he says this: many bulls surround me, strong bulls of Bashan encircle me, and lions, and etc. Skip forward to verse 20. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lion. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. So, wow, there. So if we want to get back in the garden, we have to go through the sword and the cherubim, because that's what it takes to be in God's presence. But Jesus says he's the one who went through the dogs, the Roman soldiers, and he went through the sword for us. And so the idea with the cherubim is twofold: that God's presence is sacred, and we can't just walk into it, right? We can't. We know we're the general idea of sinners, but it's coming through now poetically. We're sinners, and we can't enter God's presence because he's holy. But also, Christ already went through that for us. He did take us back into the garden if we'd like to return and be in God's presence and be in the tree of life, where we can have abundance of life following him. And so, yeah, there it is. If you have any more questions, email me. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see what we do next time.